This is Your Boom is in the Shot, featuring Ben and TJ.
Yes, that's what it is, guys. We are back from our extended hiatus. As we've been very open about in the past, we are, well, I was a college student, but we are, students. I just graduated. Ben is in his final semester.
3 months left.
Yep, and we just, we had a busy end of our semester and, winter break and all those obligations, work, all that stuff, So we took a break and we didn't really record and we didn't really have access to the facilities either until the semester started back up because we record here from our college in Albany, New York. And,
equipment's just better.
Yeah, that's true. That's a big part of it. And so we're back because the semester started back up, and we've been missing Your Boom is in the Shot. At least I have. I don't know.
Oh yeah, no, I definitely have. But I've been studying. Been studying up, watching some movies. We'll get to that probably in the next episode.
Yes, we're gonna have a special makeup episode for our lack of content for you guys.
Yeah, but in the meantime, while it's still super uber relevant, we're gonna talk about Into the Spider-Verse.
Yes.
How did you like it?
I loved it. I loved this movie. I think it's easily my favorite Spider-Man movie.
Full disclosure, I've seen it twice now in theaters, and I have to go ahead and agree. I think it's my favorite Spider-Man, and I'm not gonna lie, I really liked Homecoming, Spider-Man Homecoming. Into the Spider-Verse was something else.
There's so much special about that movie. I mean, there's just so much you could talk about that's just brilliant. They just nailed it on every front. Like, like I said, I got a bunch of notes here. Just some of the things, like the animation is incredible. This movie is just beautiful to look at. The animations are super just fluid and cutting edge, gorgeous looking. So many amazing shots. The cinematography is incredible, and the story is incredible. The writing is awesome. The characters are really believable and relatable. It's paced really well. The characters are developed really well. And the soundtrack is great, and it's very like fitting to today and to to use like a lot of like the rap that like somebody like Miles would actually be listening to, and just incorporating a lot of those styles. And I'm from New York, but not New York City. But like, people that I've talked to who are from New York City or have spent a lot of time there, like it really gets that vibe of New York City. It gets it really well. And I think this was just a really interesting way to look at the character of Spider-Man in a way that nobody ever really has.
Outside of the comic books.
Right, exactly. I mean, we've had like, alternate, reality type things, but to see it on this grand a scale and with this kind of budget behind it and with this kind of effort. I mean, this movie took a good few years, to create. I mean, most movies do, but like in a way that like they're really intensely involved in the animation for a long time, and really working hard on it, and it shows. It's a great film.
Real quick tangent. Is it cinematography if there's no cameras, or is it just composition?
Well, I guess it's just composition, but it's kind of cinematography, right? Because they have like the digital, like the quote unquote camera, what I'm talking about, like on like After Effects, where you're like you can
move the perspective and stuff. I mean, I don't know, but I will say I agree with most of those points. I think it was a really, really well made film. I think that they did some interesting things with the effects on those animations.
Mm-hmm. The comic book look is awesome, and I've never seen anything like that before.
They really, I think that's one of the things that drew me in the most, is I think that visually it really evoked that comic book feel in a way that most animated superhero films haven't for me in the past. They even had the little like the floating word bubbles and stuff, in the background.
Yeah, which is awesome, and it never feels overdone either. Like there would be like there'll be panels and thought bubbles and word bubbles,
and it never felt cheesy either. It was always like it felt like it was a fluid part of the universe, like it was the way it was supposed to be, subtle. Whereas like sometimes I feel like I've seen attempts at that, and I can't like for example, like Scott Pilgrim, they do a lot of that stuff, and it's really showy and really kind of distracting. And I love Scott Pilgrim, but like it's not like the same, Like in Spider-Verse, it feels like it's part of the world. It feels like I'm watching the true adaptation of a comic book onto a film.
It helps that it's animated too, as opposed to Scott Pilgrim.
Oh, right. Whereas an animated blurb is distracting in contrast to like live action acting. But yeah, I think that, you know, those are all really good points. I think that as far as that, you know, mise en scène you mentioned, like that sort of New York feel, I think that that's something that's so important to Spider-Man. Spider-Man is a New York character. Like you can take the spider out of the city, but you can't take the city out of the spider. You know what I mean?
It's
like,
true. New York is his you know, is his domain. Like it's so intrinsically connected to that character. But I think it's also interesting that like it kind of expanded that and you know, it went bigger but also deeper, because usually like we just have Peter Parker, and like you get a lot of like that Queens perspective, you know, him in the suburban area, and like, you know, and then he's usually like around like Manhattan and stuff like that, doing his Spider-Man thing, you know, all around the city, but that's kind of his main focus.
You're right. And then
you get Miles, you get Brooklyn.
And I thought, you know, there was that thing that happens really early when they're driving to school, and his dad is like pointing out it was like Foam City or something was the name of the cafe place, and he's like, what is that? Is that another cafe? And then Miles is just like, you just don't get it, Dad. And it's like, I thought that was so funny, because that was also a jab at this whole like disparity between like youth and like elderly. You know, like Spider-Man is moving on. Like Miles is the next generation of Spider-Man, and I think that like Miles knows that, you know, even though like that's not really what the film is about, so to say, but like he's like the millennial Spider-Man, or like the Gen Z Spider-Man even. Yeah,
because it connects to the beliefs of like those two generations in a lot of ways too, in the sense that like the big message of this movie is that like anyone can be a hero. Like, you know, like it's, you know, very direct in the sense of like, oh, all these guys have spider powers and girls and pigs. But like the general sense is like, even if you don't have superpowers, like, you know, everyone can be a hero, and like, you know, everyone can be Spider-Man, whatever, you know, in a more abstract sense, like, and like I think a big part of like our generation, and also generation, the next generation, the
Gen
generation, Gen Zs, those guys, you know, I think there's a lot of like the whole like anybody can live their dream, and like you can do it, like if you use your unique talents and contribute to the world. And
well, one of the things I find really interesting, I'm a big Spider-Man fan, and I think that Spider-Man has always been about like anybody can be a hero. Peter Parker is the most normal guy in comic books before he becomes Spider-Man, you know, and he's a guy, you know, and there are different versions of the Peter Parker. I mean, there's the super genius Peter Parker, and then there's the witty high school Peter Parker, and then there's the nerdy Peter Parker. But like,
he's always been smart. I mean, he was not a super genius. I mean, in most incarnations, he designed his web shooters.
In most, but not all. I mean, if you look at the films from the early 2000s, he was just a guy. He was just high school. I mean, he was smart. He had that internship at the, you know, whatever the facility was where the spider came from in the first place. But I mean, with Doc Ock and everything. But my point is that like ultimately Peter Parker is like more human than a lot of other superheroes, especially in the Marvel universe. Like you look at Thor is an Asgardian god. You look at Tony Stark is literally the smartest and most wealthy person on the planet. You look at like any of those heroes, and they're larger than life in a lot of ways, the Avengers. And Spider-Man is an Avenger in the comic books, and they're sort of starting to get there in the MCU. But he's a normal person.
Even in the MCU, he's still just like a normal kid. He's kind of looking at these guys like how anybody would look at superheroes, and being like worshiping them, and being like, oh my god, this is so crazy.
Because they are
I'm hanging out with the Avengers, man. Like I'm an Avenger now, you know. And he's like very much like this perspective of just this normal kid, and that's a great thing that this movie really respects.
Oh yeah, and Miles is also really a normal guy. He's a normal kid. He's also smart. He's got his own things going for him, but he's a normal good guy, and I think that's one of the things that I've always found really endearing about Spider-Man. Spider-Man it's so much more accessible. And on top of that, and this is, you know, this brings me into an issue that I have with all of the MCU movies. As you guys might have figured out by now, I have difficulty with a lot of the humor that's in a lot of these big like blockbuster family movies and like action movies.
I had no idea.
Well, yeah, I know.
Really, you?
Well, yeah, I know. You can only hear the whole, you know, dick jokes too many times before you're just kind of like, you know, why are you doing this? Why are you taking away the pleasure out of these wonderful childhood comic books from me? And I didn't have that with this movie. I think that you can get away with a little bit more with animation, maybe. But I think on top of that, Spider-Man is a funny character, and it's one of the reasons why I got away. I was okay with it in Homecoming. Spider-Man is supposed to be funny. He's a kid. He's like witty. He's like he makes jokes. And
this movie is hilarious.
And this movie is really funny.
It's really organically funny.
Yep. I didn't feel like there were any like points where there was a joke that stopped the action of the film. Whereas I feel like that happens a lot. Like I feel like it happens several times in the Avengers. Mm-hmm. I think the most Age of Ultron, or not Age of Ultron, Infinity War, the most egregious of which is the infamous getting turned into spaghetti scene.
Oh yeah.
But
or like in Civil War when in Spider-Man, and he's like, you guys seen that really old movie Empire Strikes Back?
Oh yeah, like that was an unnecessary comment.
Yeah,
but
this is funny. It's stuff like like Spider-Ham, dropping his droopy hand onto the ground, or like little stuff like when older Spider-Man and Miles like infiltrate that facility.
Oh, Spider-Dad.
Yeah,
that's what I'm calling him from now on. Just for your guys' reference, there's Darkest Timeline Peter Parker, Lightest Timeline Peter Parker, which is also Miles Morales' Peter Parker, and then there's Spider Noir and Spider Pig and Penny Parker and
Spider-Woman,
Spider-Gwen.
Yeah, but that's like, so I guess we'll go into spoilers now, basically. But
well, if you've seen the trailer, you know about all those characters.
But
already.
That's true. But like Spider-Gwen, I like that change though. I like that they called her Spider-Woman.
Spider-Woman. Well, she is Spider-Woman.
She is, but like the whole Spider-Gwen thing, I always thought was weird because like if I got spider powers and decided to be a superhero, I wouldn't go by Spider-TJ. Like, oh no, people would figure that out really quickly.
I think people in the comic books call her Spider-Woman, and she refers to herself as Spider-Woman.
Because I never read the Spider-Gwen stuff.
I don't think there's very many. I've only skimmed, but my understanding is that it's called Spider-Gwen because like that's what the fans call her, and that's like that rolls off the tongue. Spider-Woman is kind of mouthy, or wordy, whereas like Spider-Gwen.
Yeah, that's true.
Plus, Gwen Stacy was a character in the comics before she became Spider-Woman, and when she became Spider-Woman, it was a big thing for people who were fans of her. Like, oh my god, it's Spider-Gwen,
yeah.
And that's why I'm calling Darkest Timeline Peter Parker Spider-Dad. For those of you who have seen the movie, and because we're starting to get into a little bit of spoilers now, for those of you who have seen the movie or haven't seen the movie, I should say, Darkest Timeline, like the idea of parenthood is also it plays its role in the film, and Darkest Timeline Peter Parker has a lot to do with it. So that's why I call him Spider-Dad.
Never wanted a kid, but Mary Jane did.
Yeah, that's this whole.
He wasn't ready to be a dad, but then meeting Miles kind of like thrust him into that.
Well, yeah, he becomes Spider-Dad for Miles.
When he goes back to his timeline, he like presumably rekindles the flame with Mary Jane, and
we hope. We can only hope, but yeah. So spoiler stuff now. I think that. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. We were talking about humor. We were talking about humor in the movie, and I wanted to say a few words about that, and how organic it was. There were jokes that were so well written into the dialogue of the film, that
like the dad when he drops him off and he's like, "I love you, Dad.
I love you, Dad. I love you, Dad. Yes, Dad, I love you."
Or I like the awkward puberty jokes, like when he gets his hand stuck in Gwen's hair,
yes,
and he can't get it out, and everyone's kind of looking at him, and you don't say anything, like nobody says it, but like you're going, "Oh, I see what joke they're making."
Right. Well, and it was really funny because he even made a comment about like, this is puberty, and then Gwen was like, I don't think you know what puberty is, which was pretty funny. But I mean, like, there were other ones too, like when they introduced the other Spider-Men and whatnot. They had
Spider Noir with his Rubik's Cube that he can't understand.
Oh my god, it's so funny because Spider Noir is in black and white. Yeah, but even when they were doing their little intro scenes, like I loved his because he said he was talking in his like 1930s voice, and he's like,
Nicolas Cage.
I like drinking egg creams and punching Nazis. And I was like, yes, Spider Noir, yes.
And then of course like the anime one is like this kawaii girl.
Oh yeah,
with
Penny
a giant
Parker
fighting robot.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and I think they did that. They did that really well because I know a lot of my friends who had seen the trailers were really worried that she was going to be some like kawaii anime like waifu or some like thing, and be kind of like, you know, almost like take away from the actual film.
Yeah.
And she wasn't. I think she was as much of an anime trope as she needed to be.
And I felt legitimately upset like when the robot like was destroyed. Like that actually affected me when they were showing like the
oh,
eye, the
no,
hearts in the eyes and all that. Like they pulled feelings out of me, Ben.
I think they did. I think that's really impressive considering how little screen time it got.
Yeah, it's true.
So,
or like another great joke, one of my favorites in the movie is when Spider-Ham says, "That's all, folks," and he's like, "Wait, can we say that?"
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, that's right.
Here, take
are we
this
legally
hammer.
allowed to say that?
This hammer
it fits in your pocket. Yeah. Oh my God, that's so funny. And that was played by what's his name? The comedian.
John Mulaney.
John Mulaney.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Nicolas Cage is
Spider-Man Noir. Yeah. And I thought that was really great. It's good to see old Nick Cage in a good movie.
And the young Spider-Man, the Peter Parker who dies, is if I'm not mistaken, it's Chris Pine.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Pretty sure.
Let me look it up.
Double check me real quick, but I'm pretty sure that's him. Because I looked it up after I saw it because I want to know who a lot of voices are. Like I didn't notice it was Nicolas Cage until I saw like his name in the
I
trailer.
Searched Chris Pine's Spider-Man, and the first thing that came up was the link to Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse IMDb page. So I'm assuming they're related. Let's see. I'm gonna scroll over. I'm not seeing him in the cast list.
No, am I wrong?
But I don't know. I don't see that version of Spider-Man in the cast list though yet. So if I keep scrolling, maybe I will. Oh, yep, Chris Pine. There he is. There's his name. Okay. There's his face. And what a face he has.
Yes, beautiful man.
Oh man!
But
come on, you don't think Nick Cage has a beautiful face?
Sure. I mean, I've seen it so many times. I feel like I've just become warm to it.
That's valid. That's valid. Or maybe it's a pan shot.
Yeah,
not quite sure.
Pan shot. I would say it was a pan shot if he was in that masterpiece that is Rosemary's Baby. But
oh my God!
enough.
We have to bring it in every episode. Yeah. So anyway, I was pretty satisfied with Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. One complaint I had, I think, after watching it the second time, I was expecting to like get a little bit more out of it. Usually, when I watch a movie a second time, you know, there's stuff I pick up on. Like I remember when I watched Get Out the second time, and then the third time, and then the fourth time. Every time I watched it, I was like, oh my God, there's so much more to digest and to think about, and there's so much more depth to it.
Because Get Out has so much like foreshadowing, and there's so many like little hints that you don't pick up on.
Well, and there's so many clever literary elements, and I think that's an aspect that makes a film great. And you know, this really great movies I think can be appreciated on multiple viewings. And the one thing that disappointed me the most about Spider-Man is that I watched it the second time and I don't feel like I got much more out of it. I think that everything was a little bit less heart-wrenching for me the second time. You know, when you see that dedication to Stan Lee.
Oh yeah, and his cameo is great.
And his cameo is pretty funny, yeah. But like the first time I saw that dedication, I teared up a little bit, and the second time I was just kind of like, oh yeah, that's right, they dedicated this movie to Stan Lee.
I mean, I only saw it once, so I can't speak on that. But I can say that like that one time that I saw it, I was so entertained. The whole movie, I was just wide-eyed, just taking in this beauty of how this film looked and feeling for the characters, and also, you know, just something like.
And there was like foreshadowing. There was a lot of like some somewhat subtle literary elements, especially with the Prowler and Miles's uncle.
It rewards a lot of like if you know the comics, because like if you go in with that whole like, wait, but the Prowler is Miles's uncle,
right?
I wonder if they're going to incorporate that, and then sure enough,
and I think that. Even if you didn't know, they hint at it in a really subtle and really effective way. I kind of figured the first time they showed the Prowler that they were going to do that. I was like, okay, yeah, they're that Miles' uncle, the Prowler's in the film, like that it all comes together. It makes sense. And you know, my girlfriend watched it with me both times, and she didn't pick up on it at all the first time. It didn't even occur to her. And you know, granted she's not a huge Spider-Man fan, but but yeah, I think that that's one of those places where I think it was cleverly done, but
And
I
I
didn't see
commend
very
them
much.
for using lesser known villains too, like
Oh
Tombstone.
yeah. Oh, that's
and
right.
Scorpion.
Yeah, yep, yeah. Tombstone. They never named Tombstone.
No, but
which was
you know who he
interesting.
is if you know who
Yeah,
he is.
yeah.
Like, you're
Which,
like, oh, that's Tombstone.
and I think that was kind of a good call because
Yeah.
because I feel like that was one of those little nuggets of reward for people who were dedicated fans.
And also just some of the takes on the characters, like gender swapping Doc Ock, and like they were
oh,
able
the
like,
female Doc Ock was awesome.
trick us with that, or like Scorpion being an actual like mutated like human
Scorpion,
thing instead of
yeah.
just a guy in a suit,
Right.
big tail, not a big stinger thing,
Yeah. I definitely really
And
really
Goblin too,
liked
Green Goblin.
as an actual goblin.
Yeah.
I thought that was the first time that was up. I was like, did he just call that goblin? Is that
Yeah.
what? And then
Come
I
on,
spent the whole
Norman.
time.
And
Yeah.
then you're like,
and I was
oh.
like, oh my God, that's
Yeah.
so funny. And he was throwing the goblin bombs and stuff. And I was like, oh my God, that's so funny.
And the Kingpin being like this big hulking
oh my
monster,
God.
like
Yeah.
he is in the comics, is
Kingpin was
great.
iconic.
With his accent too, which like you don't really
Yeah.
ever see the Kingpin with like a New York accent like that. But
Right.
his was like
He
he
had this like mutated mafiosa thing going on, which
Kill
was
that
pretty
guy.
interesting. yeah, that was a good line. Yeah, and like I said, I loved the movie. I found myself really enjoying it, and I don't have a lot to pick apart. That it's like nitpicky, but that like I think that it was really straightforward. There wasn't a lot to digest. Once you watch the film, you've kind of got it. You had your enjoyment, and that's it. And I'm always more partial to films that I can go back to. And it's not that I can't go back to Spider-Man. I did see it twice, but I think that I was disappointed at how little I got out of it after watching it more than one time.
Yeah, I guess I'll have to see how I feel on a second viewing because I will definitely watch it again, whether that's in theaters or when it comes out on Blu-ray. Because I'll probably end up buying the Blu-ray because I'll probably want to watch this movie 100 times or not, or I'll be like you and on the second viewing be like, But either way, I was so entertained by the first one that just that in of itself speaks a lot to me.
And the second one wasn't unentertaining. I mean, I think this is a very entertaining movie, and I think this is one of the few exceptions I'll make for a movie that's maybe entertaining but not super deep, where I think it's still really, really good.
I think it's deep enough, though. I mean, there's a lot of like really relevant characters.
It's definitely not shallow.
Yeah, it's not like it's not like your typical DC movie or even like a lot of the MCU movies. As much as I enjoy the MCU, a lot of that is just kind of
it's just
sizzle,
fluffy action scenes and stuff.
Yeah, where like this
and
like
one-liners.
All of the Spider people, pretty much, not so much Spider Ham, but like pretty much all the rest of them had like an actual arc.
Oh,
and,
yeah,
like even Gwen,
to an extent, yeah.
like the way that they pulled that all together was so brilliant. Weaved everybody into each other's stories, playing Gwen like almost a love interest, but not quite, and
but
then, but also she has her own story. She's her own hero, and Spider-Man gets to be a dad, like the older Spider-Man, but also like still the hero of his own story, like with the Mary Jane thing, and like the whole thing at the party is great, and he's like he sees the younger Mary Jane, and like you put yourself in his situation. You're like, what if I was 40 and I messed it up, but I saw my 20-year-old version of my wife, like or 26 or whatever, and was like, oh my God, she's younger and hotter, and I can make it right in this universe, and
it's
but
totally
there's just all these great things, and and even like we said, the anime, the what was her name?
Penny Parker.
Yeah, and the young Spider-Man, voiced by Chris Pine. Even he's like really compelling for when he's on there. He's like the Spider-Man that we all know. He's like the Spider-Man,
the amazing Spider-Man.
Yeah, and also the way that they played, like they introduced all of them, is perfect too.
Oh yeah, I thought that was a really clever choice. The sort
one more
of
time,
like,
and the one and only Spider-Man.
Yeah, and they all did it, and they all got that, and
they all realized that they weren't the one and only Spider-Man.
Right, and I think, but they all are the one and only Spider-Man in their own own universe.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting.
The fact that they all had to go like back too, so like the whole time, like, oh, this isn't going to be like a happy ending where everyone hangs out in this universe they
all have to go home.
Yep.
And but it's funny because they kind of tease us with that that scene at the end of Gwen appearing through the colorful dimensional vortex and talking to Miles, and I think that one of there's a really interesting scene, and this is getting into fan theory territory here, but like I remember and this is the one thing that I got out of the second viewing that I didn't notice the first time. When they're in the big fight scene at the end of the movie, Miles is when he's fighting Kingpin, there's a scene where he's looking into the black dimensional hole and there's webs everywhere. And all I could think of is, and then there was a scene of Miles's face and you could see the reflection of the webs moving in his mask. And I was like, he's looking into the threads of like the dimensions, like the nexus of all of the different Spider-Verses. And I was like, and I think that it's almost like that brushed off on him because now he's seen into the other dimensions. And then Spider-Gwen appears to him, you know, at the end of the movie after everything subsided, after they got rid of the collider, after the plot is ended and all of the dimensions should be, you know, in their own places. But she was able to talk to him through this dimensional bubble.
Yeah.
So like, you know, maybe that's hinting to some future
sequel bait.
Yeah, right. Some Spider-Verse fun in the future. But yeah, you know, it was a fun movie. I was pretty satisfied with it.
Yeah, and I also like little things with like being a comics fan, being a longtime Spider-Man fan and stuff. Like you knew right from the jump this was going to be like a special love letter to comic book fans with that whole comics code thing. I wanted to make sure I mentioned that because the first time I saw that I was like,
I forgot about that.
Like, oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, me too. I and it's great because Spider-Man has always been kind of this revolutionary comic book in terms of like, I don't want to say politics, but in terms of the content. You know, a lot of people consider Spider-Man the first comic book that wasn't racist. You know, like or like exploitation. You know, like Spider-Man, Peter Parker went to a high school that was segregated in a time where they were still writing comic books where black people were only criminals.
Oh, and now we also have a Spider-Man that is black.
That is black himself, yeah, which is really interesting.
But not only black,
mixed race, yeah,
he's also
Hispanic, yeah. Which, you know, I that speaks to me. You know, that whole Brooklyn attitude, the fact that he's not just some like white guy. You know, like all of these little things I find really endearing about the Miles Morales Spider-Man. And the fact, you know, he's throwing up tag art in the streets and like listening to like hip hop, or well, I should say he's listening to like Post Malone.
Yeah,
so
that's the song that he likes. That
the Sunflower.
Yeah.
But even that I thought was really well written because he does that little humming thing. He doesn't know the words, so he's kind of like humming like every other word. And I was like, we all do that.
Yep.
Like, you know, when we're hearing that song for the first few times, it's like really catchy and stuck in our head. Like, you know, like just I thought that was really funny. And really, you know, kind of like I think it was endearing. I think a lot of that movie is endearing, and I think that's the word that I'd like to tag on that, is that it's not the most sophisticated movie in the world, but it's not trying to be. You know, it's trying to be entertaining, but in a more maybe holistic way. I feel like a lot of the big budget MCU movies are entertaining in a forceful way. I feel like they're supposed to like grab you and like make you look at these explosions and these fighting and these glamorous, you know, superheroes and their one-line dick jokes and like, you know,
you and your superhero dick jokes.
Oh God, it drives me nuts.
They really make you mad.
They do. They really do. They really do. And like, you know, I can get behind a dick joke every now and again, but like, I don't want it to distract from my fucking movie.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Oh, also, I just thought of it randomly, but one of my favorite scenes in this whole movie, I can't like not mention it, is when I started mentioning it earlier, but when they infiltrate that place, Miles and Spider Dad, and like, well, the first part is really funny when like he's meeting with Doc Ock, and he just has like his sweatpants on, and his like bulgy stomach, and he's like, hey. Trying to like sweet talk her, and then like Miles is like invisibly, you know,
holding
carrying the computer, and then like later on when he's like, good news, we don't need the monitor. And then, like,
that's right.
Chucks that, but like then the next scene is so great when they show up in like the little dining hall, and they're like, and he's like, oh, it's bagel time.
He took a bagel.
And then everyone's like, Spider-Man?
Spider-Man. They all pull out their guns.
Yeah.
Yeah. all the scientists with their laser rifles.
Yep. And then another thing that's really endearing about this movie, like you were saying, like is when Spider Dad's trying to teach Miles how to swing later on in that scene, and he's like not picking it up, but there's this great like master pupil thing that happens there.
Yeah.
It's really just really beautiful.
Well, they kind of I feel like it would almost been like subtle and kind of got lost, except that Spider Dad like mentions it, and he's like, "I'm the one who can do it. No, I'm the old one doing it."
They do literally say
you're
it.
The, You're the young one who can do it, but not quite as well.
Yep.
Yeah. They point it out, and I think that's pretty funny, and I think it could have gotten maybe lost a little bit in that whole overall.
But there's even
scene.
like the thwip, like the word coming up, or like with the bagel, and it's like the bagel hits him, and it's just bagel. Like,
yes, yeah.
It's those little things like that. Like it just plays the humor so well,
and and that's what I mean. Where it's like a little bit more subtle humor. It's not so like we stopped the action so that we could tell you this joke. It's
not Tony Stark like calling what's his face Squidward.
Right. It's part of the sort of character of this film, which I find so much more appealing. And I love that scene because that's when Spider-Gwen shows up.
Yep. And it's also that's one of those literary elements where like, because at first you don't realize that she's Gwen. I mean, you kind of do, but like, because she goes, "I'm Gwanda
from South Africa."
Yeah, and like, but so like one thing that's funny is like earlier, Gwen sees Miles like running across the side of the building
and just says, "Huh."
Yeah, and she's like, yeah. So you're like, why would she just say, "Huh"? And then you're like, oh. That's Gwen.
And that's a classic. That's a classic. Her character is another example of what we were talking about earlier with that like nuggets for people who've read the comics. Because when she showed up on screen the first time, I knew it was her. It was like, oh, that's Gwen. That has to be Gwen. In that classroom scene where she's the only one who laughs at his witty joke. And then they see her immediately afterwards in the hallway, and they have that scene where he like sticks to her hair or whatever.
Well, I think I in my head was thinking that was like Gwen pretty much automatically, but I don't think I connected it's Gwen from the other universe who is Spider-Gwen. I thought maybe it was like his universe is Gwen or something.
Yeah, and I definitely got that. I'm with you there. And I think that clicked a little bit more when she saw him running along the side of the building.
Yeah.
And I think that they did this really good job of there's just a split second in the scene at that laboratory where you see her dressed in a lab coat.
Oh, yeah.
And it's
like she works there or something?
Yeah, I was like, well, what is she doing there? She's a high school kid. And then that thing happens where they're right at the end. They're about to lose the computer and everything's going to crap. And then all of a sudden they're all tangled up hanging in a web, and they're like, did you do that? And it's like, oh, here she is.
Yep. And I love how she's so good at it. Like she's so good at being
Spider-Woman. Yeah.
Because like she, like one thing I picked up from like one of the things I was kind of hinting at the animation earlier, it's great is that like all the characters have very different kinds of animations that really convey their character. Like Miles is kind of like really sloppy with his movement, but also like has a certain, I don't know, I guess swagger sometimes when he starts to figure things out.
Oh yeah,
and
when he puts the suit on and then he's swinging around and he's doing everything better than everybody.
Spider-Gwen, like all of her movements are so calculated and are so precise. Like when she lands on that branch and it's just like poof.
Yes.
And then she's like, and she's got Doc Ock like is taking
care
of.
And that's what I mean when like there's so much character. Like you were saying earlier, you felt bad about the robot. Yeah. And I was like, and I made a comment about how it had so little screen time. It's amazing because all of those characters had really little screen time, but they fit a lot of character into each of them. Like
those introductions help, for him to say like, "Oh, I lost my best friend Peter" and all that.
But like, I think even more so is, do you remember the scene where Miles is? They're all in the Miles's universe's spider cave, and
and old Spider-Man's like, "I had something like this as well," but
yeah,
I feel bad for
in
this
that
guy.
In that scene, Miles basically Spider Dad was like, "Oh yeah, Miles can turn invisible and do an electricity thing," and he's like, "I can't do it on command." And then they're all like,
"He can do it on command."
Yeah, well, but right before that, there's a scene where they're all like, bullying on him. They're like, "Well, can you do this or can you do that?" And they're all making allusions to what that Spider-Man universe is good at. So, Spider-Gwen says something about, "Can you, perform feats of acrobatic, whatever." And, Spider-Dad says something like, "Can you stop a, runaway train?" And like, they all say something that Spider-Man is specifically all about. Like Penny Parker, I think, says something about like computers or programming or whatever. And Miles can't do any of those things.
Spider-Man Noir says something about punching Nazis.
Yeah, probably. Like I mean, yeah. And well, I think it's like a can you predict like a surprise like punch or whatever? And then he's like, tripping him over and over again. But like I think that adds a lot of character into each of those characters because they're talking about what they're good at and what they do. Spider-Gwen is an acrobat. That's what her thing is. That's her moves are calculated. Her actions, are based around that kind of like style. And Spider-Man Noir punches things and uses a pistol. And like Peter Parker whacks things with a cartoon hammer,
that he pulls out of his pocket.
That now Miles has, fun fact, Miles has a pocket hammer.
2-dimensional pocket hammer.
Yep, for whacking things with. But I think that was a really interesting little scene because it's about, setting up the fact that Miles has something that none of them have. And, and that's that he perseveres and that he, he's normal, but he can also be a hero. And
well, that's why that leap of faith like notion is so great.
Yeah.
He's like, and it comes back to Spider-Dad.
Yeah.
He's like, how would you know? You don't. It's a leap of faith. That's all it is. It's a leap of faith. And later on, he's like, what if Mary Jane doesn't, like want me back? And he's like, leap of faith. And then he's like, oh, right, leap of faith.
Yeah. Well, it's even better because Miles doesn't say it, and then he goes, "Oh, it's a leap of faith, faith, isn't it?" Yeah. Yeah, I think the film was really well written, and I think it was the voice actors did a wonderful job. I never was sitting there thinking, "Oh, this is like poorly voice acted." It never felt choppy at any point or anything like that. And there were some really great scenes, and I think I think that's one of the things that it really succeeds from is character development and character creation. Like all of the characters who get lines in that movie are really, really interesting. Aunt May, is a great character in that film. She's
like Alfred, basically.
Yes, she has that. Yeah, she has that Alfred mentality where she's like, "Oh, I know what's going on even more so than you guys do, but I'm just the side character here." But I mean, even more than that, like look at his dad. Like Miles's dad played a big part in that film, and his mom. And his mom, maybe not as big, but still there.
Honey, you know how I feel about Spider-Man. Come on.
Yeah. Well, and that was a big subplot in that film about
him coming around to Spider-Man. And when Miles sees him as Spider-Man, and he's like talking to him as like, "I love you."
No, yeah, and he's like, "What? you what'd you say?"
I don't agree with your methods, but or something.
I can't argue with your results.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was really interesting. There was a lot of development there between Miles and his father. Miles came a little bit closer to his dad, and his dad came a little bit closer to Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then everyone had development, like everyone that like all those Spider people, pretty much. I mean, like Noir, kind of like not as much, but he still like gets intrigued by like the Rubik's Cube and like the colors and all that.
Well, I think
that's not really an arc, but like something happens. But like the other characters like really have arcs. Like Gwen really does too. Like kind of getting over her. Like a lot of her grief over, ironically, Peter. Is in her universe. Peter became the Lizard and died. Yeah. And then like the older Spider-Man we already touched on with like redeeming himself with Mary Jane,
right?
Being a father and all that.
And Peter Porker Spider-Ham didn't really have anything, but what he did have is that we got to see more of him than a cartoon comic relief. In that scene that I was mentioning earlier, where they're all like beating up on him because, well, actually, no, I'm sorry. It was a different scene. It was a scene later in the film when they were judging whether Miles was ready or not to go, like to be a Spider-Man. and he'd said something about how we all lost somebody.
Yeah.
And it was like even Spider Pig or Spider Ham had that like sort of adult serious maturity, you know, even being a cartoon character.
And then when Miles ends up stepping up to the plate and making it happen and being the one who can like shut all this down, he has that great callback to Watch the Hands.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
you know, which started with Spider Dad earlier when he had him tied up. And yeah, and even Spider Dad though, he was he's really reluctant at first. He's like, "Kid, I'm not helping you." Like,
oh my god, he was
back
pathetic.
To the universe, yeah.
He was a fat, lazy piece of crap.
And then they play on that too of him like being fat just enough times for it to keep being funny without getting old. And like when Aunt May hugs him and she's like, "You're a little wider than I remember." He's like, "Yeah, I've been told that." Like,
yeah, or the scene when he's talking to Doc Ock and she's like, yeah, you seem to have gained some weight, maybe dimensional warping. He's like, yeah, that's it, dimensional warping.
Great humor, man. It's such a funny movie.
Yeah.
And it just has a lot of heart, a lot of charm, and
I definitely recommend that you guys go out and see it.
Yes, Into the Spider-Verse, masterpiece. Love it.
Yep.
Love it. 5 out of 5.
Go out and see it, guys. You want to call it there for the episode, or do you think we got more to say?
Oh, what do I have in my notes? Do I have more to say? Do I have more to say? I like how Miles's suit was also intrinsically connected to his character.
Oh yeah, he
took an
a regular
old spider
one
suit and spray painted it
to make it his.
And he's also like wearing Tim's with his suit.
and shorts and like
basketball shorts. Just keeps him grounded and connected to his roots.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty neat.
And the animations, we mentioned the comic stuff, but like there's a lot of like chromatic aberration and what else there? Halftone dots, cross hatching, like all that stuff that they just hold on to and from the pullover from comics. And
they have this like there's like speaking of that like chromatic aberration, it's almost more like a there's like a 3D old fashioned like red blue 3D filter put on everything, but like only on things that aren't like the subject of the composition.
Yeah, it's like the city when Miles is diving or something, you know. And
which was a really powerful scene, speaking of which, where, you know, when he's finally...
down one.
Yeah, when he's finally...
That whole scene,
That whole scene when he's finally accepted that he's Spider-Man. Yeah. And they've got that, like, you know... That song playing in the background I thought was actually a pretty good song. And
the soundtrack's really good.
Yeah, and I like that...
Been rocking on Spotify lately.
Yeah, I really, really liked the choice for that soundtrack because it's not nostalgic music that they've been putting in all of the other ones and all of those other MCU movies. And like, you know, and even though it's not technically an MCU movie, it is, you know,
there's old rap with his uncle though, like when they're doing their tagging.
Oh yeah,
it's like Biggie.
Yes,
and stuff like
that's true. But that was, you know, but that fit because that was so much about not about nostalgia. It was about
generations.
Yeah, and it was about that. It was more evoking that thing of you know, being a young person and having a mentor.
Yeah,
you know, and learning from that mentor because that was what he had.
Which is makes it so heart wrenching when he dies.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely,
yeah,
but
I'm sure there's other things in an hour. I'm gonna be like, damn, why didn't I say that? But like, I pretty much said everything that.
I think we hit the important points, and I hope we've convinced you to go check it out because it is good.
Although if you haven't seen it yet and you've listened through this whole episode, I'm sorry we spoiled it for you because it's a beautiful movie and you want everything to be revealed freshly for you.
Yeah, that's true. It's not going to be as good if you don't have a clean eyes going into it. But I will say for those of you out here who haven't seen it and have listened to this whole podcast, still I recommend you go out and see it. I know me personally, if there's something I'm not interested in, sometimes I'll just get it spoiled just to see if it was something that I would have liked because I never would have seen it on my own.
Like that trailer we saw, seeing this movie.
Oh
that
gosh,
dog movie.
Oh gosh,
that had every single plot point in the trailer.
This is a little bit of a tangent. We might take this out of the episode and put it in its own little thing.
Yeah.
For those of you who've been to the movies over this last few months, there's been a trailer for a movie that was an adaptation of a book about a dog, and I don't remember what it's called. It's like you know, My Way Home or some cheesy thing like that. The trailer, I feel like after watching the trailer for this movie, I had watched the entire movie.
Yep.
It's the story of some dog who
gets an owner, and they
yeah,
love
and
each
he's
other.
a doctor, and it's great, and they're living their
a
life.
Squirrel shows up, and the dog chases after
Yep.
it. Gets lost in the wilderness, encounters all sorts of wild animals.
Befriends a bobcat, and then fends off some wolves,
and his owner's like, or her owner's like, "Oh, you're back."
Yeah, that was the whole trailer. That was the whole trailer, and I feel like I saw every single plot point of that movie in that trailer. I don't know why I would go see it. I wouldn't have any feelings like I know there are some people out here that's their thing, like my mom, for instance, she loves Lifetime movies. They're all the same. It's all just like your cookie cutter rich white family having rich people problems and
I guess
goofy
you could
romance.
Argue in their defense that like most of those runaway pet type movies and stuff, like the dog's gonna come back, like
or die.
Yeah, but like they're gonna be reunited in some way or something. But at least if like maybe the dog dies saving the owner or something, like like it's gonna end like with them back together. Like it's not like you're really hanging by a thread of like what's gonna happen.
Yeah, I mean you're right. They're never really like super. Like, ooh, wow, what's gonna happen? But I mean, like, but that's
you shouldn't reveal the movie in the trailer,
right? And I think that's I have a big problem with movies like that, that style of film, because to me, like, I don't understand, and this might be a me issue. Like, I might be missing something, but I've never really gotten the appeal of those movies because there's no like depth to them. It's like you're trying to make me fall in love with this character because it's a cute pet and we have an affinity for pets, and like I have an affinity for pets. I have a cat. I love my cat, but I'm not the kind of person who sees a dog and then turns into a puddle of mush. And
a lot of people are, though.
A lot of people are, and I guess that kind of movie might be for them. But I don't want to watch a movie about some characterized dogs, personified like dogs or cats or whatever, running through the wilderness. And
though I guess again, in their defense, just to play devil's advocate, there's still plenty of people out there who would listen to us talk about Spider-Man and be like, I don't understand why these kids go pay for this movie and where these people just shoot strings out of their wrists. Well,
yeah, and I know people who would say that they wouldn't go see it because it's animated, or because it's superheroes, and that's what I'm saying. Like I'm probably missing something. It's probably a me issue, but these kind of films aren't appealing to me.
Yeah.
And I think there's also some validity behind my opinion. I mean, those movies don't win Academy Awards. When was the last? I mean, right? I mean, I don't think this movie is up for an Academy Award.
Old Yeller won something. That one's won a lot of stuff, didn't it? But that
was a book. That was like a bestseller book, and I've read Old Yeller, and Old Yeller is the quintessential dog book, if you ask me. And that's a book where the dog dies at the end. So there is some. You spend this entire time getting a connection between these two characters and getting attached to them, and then the dog dies, and it's like, damn.
Milo and Otis, I think, got some recognition in the awards side. You ever seen that?
No, I haven't.
It's a movie I actually really liked it when I was a kid. It's a really touching movie. It's like this like dog and this cat who like they both have the same owner. They get lost together and they are like trying to find their way back to
like civilization.
Yeah.
Well, and I want to say that I have no problem with those the concept of that. Like I have no problem with watching a film about like dogs and cats who have to find their way home. My problem is in that I've never seen a movie like that hasn't been exactly like every other movie like that.
Fox and the Hound wasn't.
That movie was soul-wrenching. And you know what?
That I think about it.
I didn't think about that, but you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I never would have thought of that as an example, but you're right.
It's animated.
Because it's animated. Yeah, and I think that's part of it. Because then there's also like Balto and like those other like old animated films that I remember watching growing up, and I liked them enough. But yeah, I think that like there are problems with this film that I remember watching in the trailer and just really the film feels like it's a grab for me. It's a cash grab. It's a trendy BuzzFeed movie, like from the voice acting to the music to the cinematography in the trailer.
Twist, Ben.
It's an amazing film.
All movies are cash grabs.
Oh well, yeah, I know, but like I think there are movies that are made with artistic integrity,
like they also have to make money to
but I think that right, but I think that a lot of like auteurs, like they make films because they love making films. They don't make films solely because they're trying to make a buck. I think making a buck is how you fund making films. And I think that there are some movies that come out that aren't about the art. They aren't about, let me make a great, story or a great piece of artwork. It's about, let me make something that'll sell a lot real quick and then no one will remember it in 5 years.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And that's what that film looks like to me.
And if they sell enough toys, you can be like Transformers and just keep making those
Oh
movies.
God, that's a whole nother episode. We could make a whole episode on Transformers. You know what? We should do that. If you guys are interested in that, please email us, mention in the comments. Do you want to see a whole episode where we talk about Transformers movies? I don't, but I will do it.
We'll tear them apart.
That's probably what will happen.
It'll be a totally different kind of episode. Because every episode we've done so far, we've pretty much sucked the movie off because we keep seeing movies that we really like, which is fine, and there's nothing wrong with that. But like, I think you said this when we went to go see Into the Spider-Verse.
That we should watch some movies that we aren't necessarily going to like.
Yeah.
And I think next week, guys, if this is all making it into the episode about Into the Spider-Verse, and we might cut out the dog stuff and then put this on the end. We'll see what happens. If this makes it in and you're listening, next week when we talk about what we saw over the break, I think we're going to talk about some things that we wouldn't normally see. And we might even say some things that aren't exactly positive.
I'll say at least a few of those things.
yeah, me too. And I also want to throw out there just cover my own butt a little bit. I talk all the time about movies I don't like in this podcast. I mean, almost all of them are MCU movies.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be legendary for my dislike for MCU movies, and it's gonna be totally taken out of context. People are gonna be like, "Oh, Ben, he hates Marvel." I'm gonna be like, "No, Ben loves Marvel. Ben just
Ben's a pan shot.
Ben's a whole pan shot. Didn't hit nothing important, guys. Didn't hit nothing important. And remember, that's a pan shot.
That's valid.
That's valid, guys. That's valid. All right. We're gonna call it there, I think.
Yes. That's all, folks.
So, do you want to legally say that? That's all.